by Jesus!
Moving Wisconsin forward, one joke at a time. This is Kristen Bry with As Goes Wisconsin.
Yada, yada, yada.
Hello, Wisconsin!
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin for our No Sour Haha Fun Time Power Hour. And speaking of fun time, I am not a big gamer. I think the last time I regularly played video games was Donkey Kong circa 1995.
Oh, I think you're behind a little bit.
But this is a game I feel like I could play and would like to play because I have said many times I am not a journalist, but I do, distribute information. And this is a game where you play a journalist in the fictional town of Twin Lakes. And the stories you publish, do they help the people of the town prepare for the things that they need to be prepared for? And so I saw this write-up about this game, and then I kind of went down the rabbit hole of figuring out what Field Day Lab is. And so I'm so excited to have Sarah Gagnon, who is the creative director of Field Day Lab, which is at the Wisconsin Center for Education Research in Madison, join us to tell us about Field Day Lab, about this game, and all, kind of the educational benefits that it can come from learning how to be a journalist. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thanks for having me. It's so great to be here. I'm excited to talk about the game.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess before we jump into the game, before I saw the write-up about the game, I didn't know what Field Day Lab was. So what is Field Day Lab as far as the role that it plays inside of the Wisconsin Education Research Department?
Yeah, so we are at the UW Madison, and we're part of a group called WCER, Wisconsin Center for Education Research. So we are a research lab, but because our research looks at big data, so it's like we need lots of data, we have a studio that makes kind of like high quality games that get played all over the country. So it's kind of a little bit of, we wouldn't be making these if we didn't deeply care about having like an impact on kids and on education. So like I get to really participate with that part of it. But then there is like a big component that we have a research team that's thinking about how do people learn, and games are a really great way to see what people like, how people interact with things and how we can learn. So there's both of that in our work.
So it's computer games, right?
Yeah, they're on computers, not like consoles. And the reason is because our games are intended to be played in schools. So all of our games can be played within a 20 to 40 minute period. You won't necessarily complete the game, but you'll have like a good experience, and it will feel like hopefully hitting some of those educational marks as well, because they've been designed to work in schools. So they all work on Chromebooks. They all, work in schools, but also like a lot of the kids play our games outside of school too, because we try to make them fun.
Oh, that's so awesome. The new game is called Headlines and High Water. And so what is the premise of this game? Because you came up with this, right?
Yeah, this was kind of very exciting for me. I worked with Field Day for about 8 years. I was kind of like you, where I didn't have a lot of, I didn't play video games as like my pastime, but my spouse did, and he had started the lab, and I was an artist and just started working with him on designing things. And so I've been doing creative direction with Field Day for 8 years and love video game design. Like it's so challenging, so hard. And I started thinking about like, well, if I was going to come up with my own idea for what to do, what would it be? And I came up with this idea. I was thinking about fake news. I was thinking about my own kids and how to teach them about how to digest information, and started thinking, I'm really into like philosophy. And I was kind of thinking about this idea of like, well, if kids are like exposed only to like, can you identify fake news? Have they really been thinking about like, what is real news and what is real news anyway? And that's that question of like, what is news is where this all started. And so I was like, what if we did a game that was about the professional practices of what news is? Because news is, it's not like true, untrue. It's like this evolving story that's happening that we're constantly getting closer to the truth, but never quite. It's a mix of subjective and objective realities, how people feel and think. It's right now. So it's not like history where we can go back and study it. So those are all kind of the thoughts bubbling up in my head. And then we got funding through the UW Baldwin Award.
We're talking to Sarah Gagnon, who is the creative director of Field Day Lab at UW Madison, and about the new game called Headlines and High Water, which is basically you play a journalist in a small town, right? And you're trying to gain the trust of the people in the town to be able to be resources and tell you their stories so you can report on it. What are some of the other skills that kids are supposed to learn as they're playing the game?
That's a good question. I mean, this kind of game, we call it a text-based adventure game. And so there's a lot of reading in it. And it's kind of similar to those choose your adventure books that you read, like where you kind of read to a section and then you choose something and you go off and you have to choose one or two options. And so you learn reading. You also learn like what are the skills that journalists need to do their job well. And so that's a big thing. Another thing is like how to stay on assignment. So your editor gives you an assignment when you get going, and you can kind of talk to anyone and collect anything, but like you also do a better job on the story if you actually follow the brief. And so those are kind of some of the things that, because we worked with teachers and journalists in making this game. And so the teachers were very excited about some of those kinds of things. The journalists were excited that we were including things like the kind of skills that they need, like were like tech skills. Like, do you remember to charge your phone?
Oh,
Do,
wow.
do you like know how to use your computer? Relational skills, like are you social? Other skills that the journalists really like was like the basic endurance. Like, do you remember to eat a snack in the morning? Because sometimes journalists, like once you get going, you are going. You have no breaks. And I love this because this is kind of life skills for kids too. Like if you think about like my 13-year-old, those are kind of all skills that we're struggling with. And like, did you charge your phone? Do you know how to, solve
Have you
problems?
drank any water today?
Exactly, exactly. And so, being able to do research, that's part of it. But like when we really broke down what makes a journalist, it's like this whole kind of category of things. And I thought, how cool to be able to inspire kids that this is a cool job. Like
Yeah.
like you have to see if you can get people to trust you, if you can build relationships, if you can prove yourself. So it's not just a boring office job. This is a pretty cool job to get.
And so the original feedback though was that the game was unfair,
Yeah.
right? Because the kids were having a hard time with it. But instead of changing the rules of the game, you tried to incorporate them trying to figure out why does this feel unfair?
Yeah, when when we started, we started early on testing with kids to see what they thought, and over again, kids were saying, "This game is unfair. This person wouldn't talk to me." So you're from out of town, you're from like the big city, and you come into the small town, and you just like get a certain amount of time that you have to deal with, or that you have to tell your story. And like, if you end up talking to somebody who won't give you any information, how annoying is that? So your trust has to be high enough for that person to talk to you. And the kids are like, that's unfair. Another big thing was that like if your camera is bad, and you didn't get to take a picture, that's unfair. And we got that over and over and over again. But you know what? When I had interviewed with my writing partner, Lindy Biller, when we had interviewed the journalists, which we talked to these like the group of 5 journalists from around Wisconsin, around the country, they were like, currently these days, there's a lot of really unfair situations. We're not given enough time. We're not given enough resources. Media companies are like slashing our budgets. And that to me was like a really important idea. If journalism is essential to democracy, to how we live as a society, like we actually need the journalists to be given resources. And so I thought, well, we can't fix the game. That would be untrue.
Yeah.
So we came up with all kinds of ways to really let the player feel like that feeling of unfairness was exactly how they should feel. But so like as a designer, we created space for the main character to complain, to be like, oh, these yokels, they're so frustrating. I just wasted all this time. So we did a whole long, like couple week writing pass to deal with this feedback. And that was really fun.
I'm so glad you didn't change the rules for them, Sarah, because having done some reporting myself, you run into that all the time.
Yeah.
And even when it's a feel-good story, your restaurant did this thing, and I would call and say, hey, we want to talk about your restaurant doing this thing. And it's like, no, I don't want to do that. And is that fair? No, it's not fair, but it's reality. It is.
Yeah, and sometimes the things you do in the game feel like a real waste of time. Like you get to choose whether or not to help your neighbor catch her chickens who have escaped. And you're like, oh, that's a waste of time. But it turns out she's related to somebody in the game. And then that person, like later when you run into them, they're like, oh, you helped her? Like, I'll definitely talk to you. And so we wanted to get the sense that like journalists today are thinking about how they build trust within communities. And that's something that Sue Robinson, who is our the main subject expert we worked with that's here at the UW, this phenomenal thinker. She's written books on trust in journalism. So that was something that we talked about for hours and hours and hours, was how important this idea of trust was to convey in the game.
So with the couple minutes that we have left, where can people find the game? Whether they want to play for themselves, whether there's a teacher who thinks it could be interesting for their curriculum.
Yeah, so right now this game is getting played, I think, 2,000 times a week in schools around the country, which is exciting. You can see the game at fielddaylab.wisc.edu. It's also available on BrainPop. It's free. If you just type in headlines and high waters in Google or wherever you search, you can find it.
There you go. Well, this is so cool. I think this is so fun.
I'm totally playing that when I get home.
And as more games come out, I would love to have you back to talk about some of the other games that are available, because this is such a cool resource that's right in our backyard.
I love it.
For a non-traditional superheroine, Sarah, so we can talk about that next time.
Yeah, I love that.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Sarah. We'll definitely have you back. This is super interesting. I will put all of this on our show notes for today. And when we come back, who's hotter, young Al Pacino or young Robert De Niro? This is As Goes Wisconsin. All right. This is the debate of the week.
Apparently.
And we need your input. And so we will continue to take your input until the end of the show. But who's hotter? A young Al Pacino.
Okay.
Or a young Robert De Niro? 844-967-2789. Who gets your vote? And we're talking like circa Godfather.
Right.
Like Godfather 2, because De Niro was in the second one. But this comes from a random tweet that a woman put out. She said, I'm at a wedding and having a big debate right now. Please vote. Who was hotter? Young Al Pacino, young Robert De Niro. And after 277,372 votes, it is dead even.
What?
The Twitter poll is 50-50.
Almost 280,000 people voted on who is hotter, a young Al Pacino or a young Robert De Niro, and it's 50-50.
And it's 50-50. And it's I mean, it's a little hard because, you look at them now, you're like, well, they're
both
they're
both
very
in
old
their
now.
70s
But looking at some of the pictures in the retweets and the responses and stuff,
when they were in their prime, as it were,
as it were, as in Don Lemon's prime.
They maybe not Don Lemon prime, but prime.
This is, do you have a, like, seeing the pictures of these men when they were young, they were both very attractive. They were both very, very attractive.
I found this an easy pick.
I found this an easy pick too. Who's yours?
Al Pacino.
Really?
By a landslide.
Oh, I think Robert De Niro was so much cuter when he was younger.
Good, then you can have him and I'll take him.
Really?
Yeah.
I think Al Pacino was cute, but
oh, he had those big, soulful, big brown eyes.
Yeah.
Robert De Niro.
He also played some but they both also played like psychos, and so I don't know.
I think Robert De Niro played more psychos than Pacino did.
Did he?
De Niro was in Taxi Driver. the horrible scary movie Cape Fear. Wasn't that De Niro?
I think so.
He played some scary. Ooh,
He didn't really play as many like. Did either of them really play like heartthrobs though?
well, Pacino was in Godfather, though.
I know, but was he considered a heartthrob in Godfather?
Probably. And Jimmy Kahn was too.
I mean, because they were still like murdering gangsters. That I feel like it's more the complexity of the role versus like Leonardo DiCaprio in Titanic.
Well, I'm just being blatantly superficial
So
right now.
as a young, because you were more of the age of watching them in their prime. Like by the time I was like watching movies,
Right,
they're
yeah,
a lot older than me.
sure.
So I can look at pictures and be like, oh, they were very handsome. These are guys that I probably would have had teenage crushes on.
Mhm.
But like you lived it. And so as a young person, did you also think Al Pacino your number one, or who was your number one in like the 70s, 80s?
Oh boy. It wasn't either of those two.
Okay.
It was probably Casey of the Sunshine Band. I don't remember.
I don't even know what that person looks like.
It was anyway. I just think it's an easy call.
Oh, I don't think
there's any comparison whatsoever.
Really? You don't find
None.
young Robert De Niro attractive whatsoever?
Moderately.
Oh.
Only moderately.
Did you look at some of these pictures?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Doesn't do it.
Doesn't do anything, make any tingling anywhere in your body.
They're like a tingle lackage.
All right. Well, we want to hear from you. Who, and if you didn't find either of them attractive, but who in the 70s era was you're like, oh man,
this is my
they
guy.
they really. And if you're prefer females, you can also list some of the women. But I love that this debate on Twitter and this Twitter poll got so much attention.
Do you think that she ever expected
No,
almost 300,000 people responding to that?
I think some of the responses, like her responses to this thread, is like, this is the most attention I've gotten on Twitter, I think, ever. But it's so funny to see people's responses and like they're like them posting pictures as their rebuttal of what some people like Al Pacino's never been hot, and everyone just like very, very adamant about it's either, these are the three responses: either adamant that it's obviously Al Pacino, adamant that it's obviously Robert De Niro, or can't believe that this is a 50-50 tie.
That's really interesting though, that it's 50-50. I find that fascinating.
That people are so split.
Yeah. And so evenly. That just never happens.
I know. And we have a pretty big sample size to go with it as well. But now I'm interested to try to do a survey of their. I mean, they both have done so many movies.
Yeah.
Like I'm on both of their IMDb's right now, and it's like, man, they have done a lot of films.
Oh, and I think Robert De Niro especially has done a lot more comedies than Pacino has done.
Especially in his later years.
In his later years, yeah.
I mean, Robert De Niro is pretty. And speaking of Robert De Niro, I mean, he clearly has something because he's still having kids at 79.
Yeah, that's a whole nother show.
Do you have thoughts?
Ew.
You think? I mean, do what you want, but it's just like, is there anything medically with old sperm that like affects the baby, or is it just like guys could just keep fathering children until they're dead?
Methuselah.
All right. Well, when we come back, it's been 5 years of legal sports gambling, not necessarily in Wisconsin. But my question to you is, do you gamble on sports more than you did 5 years ago? 844-967-2789. That's 844-96-PARTY. What are your sports gambling habits these days?
I hope they do that too. Sports go sports.
Do you gamble on sports more than you did 5 years ago? Well, to a certain extent, I hope if you gamble on sports at all now, I would hope that it's more than it was, because it's been 5 years. As of Sunday, it was the 5-year anniversary of the Supreme Court overturning the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, launching what has become a massive legal sports betting industry.
Yeah.
And I was just curious, as far as, we have this new sports book that's at Potawatomi. You can do sports betting at Oneida. Overall, if you're betting in Wisconsin on sports, you need a other sources.
Other sources.
But regardless, it's
a big thing.
It is a big thing. It is a booming business that is not only it's inescapable in the fact that it's advertised to you, right? Like DraftKings and FanDuel, like that is like commercials while you were watching the game being like, hey, don't you want to bet on this?
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's just so interesting to me of what, because I don't bet. Like I like my money and I don't bet. I did this weekend. I made a bet with my brother and he said, you are too confident. So I know not to bet you because, and I was like, yeah, I only bet when I know I'm right.
And what was the bet worth?
It was worth nothing. I think I said, I was like, I will bet you $100 that I'm right on this. And of course, it was on whether or not the number one cause of death for children now is guns.
Oh.
And at first he didn't believe me. And I goes, I will bet you $100. And he's like, you're too confident. Like, and then he started looking into the data and started.
You're not going to, so he wasn't going to take that chance.
No, but because I really don't. I'm not, it's just not my inclination to bet on things. And I don't know if that comes from having more doubt that I will be wrong or just leaving I just don't have enough money that I want to just play with and I'm willing to lose. But that is, I don't know if I'm in the minority, but
you're certainly not alone.
Certainly not alone. But there's a lot of people who, it's not thousands of dollars, but you put $20 on the game and you win 100 or whatever. I mean, I would say to the extent husband Mike, like I think he'll look at the odds at the beginning of the season. I think the last couple seasons, like he's looked at the odds of Packers winning the Super Bowl.
Okay.
And we'll put like $100 down on the end of at the very beginning of the season. If it's like 13-1 odds or whatever, like if it works out, that's a lot of money.
Right.
And I think he's done it with the Brewers, but he's not like they're betting on every game. And so it's just like casually, like, do you casually bet on sports? Do you
dabble?
Do you, if you do fantasy football, I guess that's technically sports betting.
Definitely.
As far as the leagues I've always been in are just, friendly. I think it's like $20. And I think the winner, whoever wins, I don't even know if we did that this year. Whoever wins has to like buy happy hour. So it's like you still spend it on the group anyways.
It's a wash, yeah.
It's more bragging rights, but some of those leagues there's much more money involved. But I'm just so interested in the 5 years since this has become so dominant. What are your sports gambling habits?
And what are the avenues you choose?
Yeah,
because there's so many options now.
Because that's when we had Dr. Mike on the show during football season. That was kind of the bets he would recommend, like the over under and all the different,
right.
and parlays and like that's the thing. There's an entire different lexicon when it comes to betting that have you seen Air yet?
No.
But you know what I'm talking about,
yeah,
the Nike movie?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
There's a beginning scene with the main character, Matt Damon's character, stopping over in Vegas and just making a bunch of sports bets. And it's kind of setting up the character likes to take risks. But he wins all of his sports bets basically in X amount of thousands of dollars and then loses it all on the craps table.
Oh man.
Because it's like one thing to a certain extent with sports betting, it's like with enough knowledge, that's the reason that there are odds, right? Is like you can watch and see the players who are injured or what the matchup is, and obviously you still have to play the game. But if you're knowledgeable about the game, you might think that you have a little bit of an edge.
844-967-2789, 844-96-PARTY. You can call and or text at any time from the 608. I only can bet when I go to Illinois or some other state that has it, and I can go online and drop by Potawatomi to see it over the weekend. It's harder to do this here because you have to be on site. Vegas is where I do most of my sports betting, and I'm sure you're in plenty of company.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like when in Vegas, right?
Right.
But here are some of the funny, like the stats to just kind of blow your mind with sports betting, the sports betting world, to highlight what kind of 5 years of legalization has looked like. But in the meantime, if you would like to weigh in on what's your sports gambling habits look like, you partake at all, partake a little bit, not at all, 844-967-2789. So 97 billion. That's how much Americans bet on sports in legal jurisdictions with consumer protections last year.
97 billion?
95 billion.
90. Oh, well.
$95 billion. And that is more money than the amount spent on ride sharing, coffee, or streaming services.
Wow.
It's a lot of money.
I had no idea.
So it's a big business. So the next number is 71%. That is the percentage that two sports betting companies, DraftKings and FanDuel, control of the U.S. market. So DraftKings and FanDuel own 71% of the market. And so despite taking in 10% of wagers, these companies have struggled to turn a profit.
What?
So that's what's interesting. So basically they have 70% of the market. They take 10% of your wager, and they still are not. That FanDuel recorded its first quarterly profit last year, and DraftKings has yet to report a profitable quarter. How is that possible?
I don't.
What is their expenditures that their overhead is so high that they can't in a 95? So like, what is that? 70% of 95 billion, and then you take 10% of that, and they're not making money. What?
Yeah, that seems somewhat suspect.
I did that. I mean, that's right. That's the equation that you would probably get, right? As far as 70, if consumers are spending $95 billion, 70% of that is going to either DraftKings or FanDuel. They're taking 10% of those wagers
and not making a profit.
And then not making a profit. Like, what are they spending their money on? Okay, 33. That's the number of states that currently have legal sports betting.
Oh,
we do not. Well, we have some, but not like
limited.
It's limited to the casinos, certain reservations casinos. Another 4 states have legalized sports wagering.
How is that different?
I don't know.
Other than using a different word.
But don't have any sports books operating yet. I don't know what the difference between wagering and betting is. It seems like those would be synonyms. You can look that up while I do the next stat. 3. The 3 most populous U.S. states, California, Texas, and Florida, have not legalized sports gambling. They account for 26% of all teams in major North American pro leagues, but no legalized gambling in any of those 3 states.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
This is from sportslingo.com. What is the difference between a wager and a bet? In sports betting, a wager refers to the amount of money risked on an outcome. A bet refers to both the action of placing a wager and informally the money risked.
That makes what?
Because of the similarities, the two can be used synonymously in the world of sports betting. It's the same thing.
So I'm
not sure how they're state laws or something.
Something is weird here. And then the last stat, 45%. The number of women joining sportsbooks apps jumped 45% last year.
Really?
Marking the 3rd straight year that new women users exceeded men. DraftKings said that bets on women's sports had increased 61% annually last year.
I want to hear from people who win money on sports bets. 844-967-2789, 844-96-PARTY. Do you do this regularly? Do you win regularly? Do you do this regularly and never win, like my husband when he buys lottery tickets?
I mean, does he also? Mike buys lottery tickets.
That's the only thing Paul gambles on.
Okay.
Is lottery tickets.
There is something like that. Hope is strong because now I never even thought about the lottery. Never was like, oh, even when it was huge, my brother would be like, oh, like it's too big not to buy a ticket. But now that Mike pretty regularly And then he'll be driving, he'll hand me the ticket and goes, look up and see if these numbers won anything. And of course, we've never won anything. But even if you didn't win like the big jackpot, like even just to randomly win like $100,000 off the
Yeah.
lottery is like keeping that hope alive. I can understand why people pay a couple bucks for however many times a week that they do it.
And that's what it is. It's for, at least for my husband, who I would say is relatively cheap. The $2 is something he can live with.
Yeah.
Because
the upside is so great.
Right. He wouldn't go somewhere and bet $100 a hand on a game of 21. You know?
Blackjack?
Yeah. That too.
That too. So we're asking you, what's your sports gambling habits? Because Sunday was the 5-year anniversary of the Supreme Court lifting the federal ban on sports gambling in the U.S., which then domino affected into a multi-billion-dollar industry that's transformed how we watch and enjoy and talk about and experience sports. 844-967-2789. That's 844-96-PARTY. We have a comment on the YouTube live from Michael. I second with the texter from the 608. Wisconsin's laws do not make it easy to gamble on sports. I'm sure I would bet more if I could do it from my couch. And then I think this was a comment on how these companies like FanDuel and DraftKings aren't profitable. He added, LOL, those ads are not cheap.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that.
Which is true. If you think about what the ad cost is for those prime time, or even, any of the NFL slots, any of the NBA finals slots, or the playoffs and stuff like that, it's probably right. Like those are not cheap ads. But I also is that proven that you just need the constant reminder of like, hey, you can bet with us. Did you know that you could bet with us? Why don't you bet with us? To know that they exist? Because to a certain extent, I feel like the cost of acquisition of once you have someone in the door who wants to bet, you're like, we got you.
Yeah. 844-967-2789, 844-96-PARTY, being joined by Civic Media's own Chad Holmes.
Chad Holmes, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good. I find this very interesting because back in the day, I did a little sports betting, and I think you can't make it too easy.
Oh, because it's
You
slippery
really
slope?
I tell you, every year I tend to go to Vegas one time. In fact, I go, during the summer to play a little poker. I like doing that. But I did a little sports betting, and all of a sudden, all you do is watch these numbers. And I almost won big one time, but that's what everybody says. So again, I tell you, it's one of those situations. I did a parlay. I got the first 4 games right. Was going for the 5th for like $1,200 because I bet $50, and then I lost. And it's like you want to rip your hair out. But the big picture on it is I do like to gamble a little bit.
Okay.
But I rarely do it because it's not easy to do here.
Yeah.
I think that's actually a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we shouldn't be making it easier, Chad.
No, you shouldn't, because I do think there's a lot of unintended consequences. It sounds like easy money, not just for the people, but I think for business and the state too. And it's really, there's a lot of additional costs with it. And I think that making it too easy makes, especially for the people that you're targeting, the people that can get hurt really badly.
Absolutely. Well, Chad, you want to stick through the break and you can tell us what's coming up on your show on the other side? Sure. All right. Well, stick tuned. Chad Holmes will join us on the other side of this commercial break. This is As Goes Wisconsin. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. I am Kristen Bry. She is Jane Madnair, and we are joined by Chad Holmes of the Chad Holmes Show on Bull Falls Radio. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. But your topic got me thinking back because back in the day, unfortunately now I'm too busy to get myself into that kind of trouble, but I got some gambling stories I could tell you. That's one reason why it shouldn't be that easy, because when it's easy, you can get yourself into a situation when you leave a casino and you're pounding on your steering wheel.
Yeah.
And it's interesting though that you say that, Chad, because I can think of news stories over the years of some innocuous bookkeeper for a company, and they find out years later she's been embezzling from them for decades to feed her gambling habit. I mean, this actually does happen.
It certainly does. I mean, it was a while back. I know that Kristen, you lived in Southern California. I lived in Southern California for a year. And while I was trying to, a couple friends of mine were trying to break into, the entertainment business, and they had said, hey, "Come on out, have some fun for you're spinning your wheels right now." And I was, kind of, let's try to do something, do a lot of fun. So I get out there and I'm trying to find work. And when I'm not working, I go over to this casino, the Marengo, and
I remember those ads.
It's so easy. Yeah, it's so easy to get yourself in a bad situation. You really do. I mean, and that. So I have, on the one hand, I love playing poker. I love it. I really do. But at the same time, I would not want it to be so close to me where I would be able to go do it all the time, because it's trouble. And I really have of two minds when it comes to the whole gambling issue. And you kind of sparked old memories with your topic.
Unlock some core memories. And, it's interesting because I also think about, like, if it's not sports, we certainly have a lot of casinos around Wisconsin, and there's a lot of people who go, and that's their afternoon entertainment. Put some money in those slots, see what happens.
Well, it's different though if you have a certain amount of money set aside to play with.
Yeah.
As opposed to a number of years ago, my sisters and I took our mom to Potawatomi in downtown Milwaukee, playing nickel slots, which was my mother's big expenditure. And the woman next to her hit the jackpot, and she jumped up and said, "This is great. Now I can pay my property taxes."
Oh my gosh.
And we all kind of looked at each other and thought, well, maybe you shouldn't have done that. But I mean, I'm glad you can pay your property taxes now, but that might not have been the best use of your money.
There's a good rule to go by when you go to a casino. Do not bring any cards so you can go to an ATM. Have the amount of money you're willing to spend for entertainment. That's the way I always look. It's entertainment. It's like going out to a ball game. How much are you going to spend at a ball game? If you're willing to do it at a casino once, in a long while, but do not ever go to an ATM machine.
That's
Absolutely.
really smart.
Then you got trouble.
Yeah,
life
that's really
hack.
smart, Chad. Yep.
All right, Chad. Well, what do you have coming up on today's show?
I'm going to be taking a page from you ladies, because sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough positive stuff. And the second hour, I'm going to be all positive here today, because sometimes we've had some stories that's kind of grate at you a little bit, because they're important to talk about, but once in a while I want to talk about a few things that I've seen that are positive, and I'm going to do that in hour number 2. Also going to be talking about when I'm done with my show today, I'm going over to do a softball game, and the JV coach has an 18-month-old little boy who was diagnosed about 3.5 weeks ago with leukemia. And part of the game today is a fundraiser. And it's really a great example of our community coming together to try and help out this young couple and their little boy. And she also happens to be somebody that's a JV coach at Wausau West. So I'm going to talk about that, try to make sure everybody, along with myself, is over there later this afternoon.
That's great.
That's
Chad.
great, Chad. Yeah. And I hear you on we talk about that a lot. It's like the balance between the important and self-preservation of just not always talking about the thing that gets you angry and gets the audience angry.
As we always say, Chad, every once in a while you need some whoop, 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 boing.
Exactly. So I'm going to take some of that advice, and we're going to have some good smiles here to add points. I may early on a couple of things. I may mention Ron DeSantis. That always annoys me, but I'm going to get off that really quick.
Meatball. I mean, how could you be mad about Ron DeSantis when his new nickname is now Meatball Ron? I mean, how do you say that with a straight face, right?
And it's perfect because the guy's anti-education. So it's a perfect meatball.
Perfect meatball.
Because education is so big.
All right, Chad, this is my last question, because as Jane and I look ahead into this summer and we want to do some road trips.
We really do.
Mm-hmm.
When is the best time to come to Wausau this summer? What event should we not miss?
That's a good question. I got to find out when the balloon rally is this year. That's always a good one. We got this festival coming up on the 17th of June as well. It's bringing together all groups. It's basically a world festival. It's on the
Ooh.
400 block. It was the first one. Was last year. Was part of it. It was so much fun. You see people from the Hispanic community, the Hmong community, every community in our community, as I say it twice. But that's always a wonderful event. That's coming up in about a month as well. So those are a couple. That's a big
Put you on the
question.
spot. Well, you keep thinking about us and let us know
Well,
when we should come up.
I will.
And I bet the food at that
Absolutely.
event must be spectacular.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. It is fantastic. It was really a huge success last year, and they got it set up again in just about a month.
All right. Well, stick around for the Chad Holmes Show, which is coming up next. He's on every Monday through Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. on WXCO, Wausau, Bull Falls Radio. Thanks for calling in, Chad. This is fun.
Hey, I listen to you every day while I do my prep work. So
Oh,
you do a
that's
great
great.
job. I love it.
All right. Well, have a great show. We'll talk to you soon. And then for us, we have a packed day tomorrow. Greg
sure
Bach
do.
is back.
Yes.
He is healthy again. But we have Craig Gilbert, former reporter for Journal Sentinel, now fellow at Marquette, I think the Lubar Center. But he's been writing on the shifting changes of the suburbs. So we're going to talk to him about what the projections look like for politics in Wisconsin. Then Scott Gordon from Tone Magazine in Madison is going to talk about the importance of local politics and local control. Then we're going to, it's also along with AAPI month, it's also Jewish Heritage Month.
Fantastic.
And we're going to talk to a rabbi who we talked on the phone last week, and he's going to be very fun. And he has an organization called Own Your Judaism, which is a lot about just the spirituality of any of us, and then whether it's your religion or not, but like people who have been kind of lost or not feeling as connected to the religion, but the teachings of those religions they're still very attracted to. So I'm excited to talk to him. And then we're also going to talk to someone about mental health, because we're already in the second half of this month, but it's also Mental Health Awareness Month.
Flying by.
So flying by. Well, today was super fun. Thank you for texting. Thank you for calling. Thank you for being a part of the show. We'll see you tomorrow at 11. This has been As Goes Wisconsin.